let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at a highly specific, totally chaotic, and honestly, absolutely fascinating ecosystem. We're going to do a mock sociological analysis of the Indian high school experience. We're drawing directly from some incredibly vivid, animated source material that documents the absolute wildest, most absurd incidents of student life. Imagine for a second treating the daily madness of teenagers as a serious behavioral study. From weaponized stationery to high-stakes emotional dramas during family vacations, we are going to unpack the primal behaviors, the tribal allegiances, and the ultimate survival tactics of these students. Here's our roadmap for the day. First, we've got extreme commutes and dedicated drivers. Second, village kids and study hacks. Third, classroom romances and seat shuffles. Fourth, the Nani House study illusion. And we'll wrap it all up with washroom clubs and happy suspensions. All right, part one, extreme commutes and dedicated drivers. But before we even talk about the commute, we gotta look at what happens when these kids actually arrive and get their hands on modern educational tools. The source material describes a state of total chaos. I mean, an absolute free-for-all when students make first contact with a geometry box. Instead of seeing mathematical instruments, they experience this sort of primal confusion. They pull out the metal compass, and instead of, drawing circles, they use it to puncture holes in their water bottle caps to drink from. Others stretch the dividers out, completely baffled by a tool with two sharp metal points, and ultimately decide it's best utilized as a makeshift weapon. It's a perfect illustration of taking an academic resource and instantly repurposing it for survival and mischief. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we can categorize the student population. The village kid archetype comes with a highly precise set of observable traits. First off, the front pocket of their school bag is consistently leaking hair oil. Second, if you pop open their steel lunchbox, you're going to find exactly one slice of pickle tasked with flavoring exactly 3 heavy parathas. It's a daily culinary mystery of rationing. And third, while other students might use fancy plastic covers for their notebooks, these kids wrap theirs in yesterday's newspaper, proudly bearing the visible, overlapping rings of a teacup. Just getting these kids to school requires logistics that rival a military operation, spearheaded by the legendary bus driver Abdul and his conductor Rafiq. At 7 a.m., Abdul is literally drifting the school bus around corners to pick up kids. By 7:30, Rafiq is outside the bus, enthusiastically guiding this massive vehicle through an impossibly narrow village alleyway, probably claiming 4 buses could easily fit. The peak of their dedication happens at 8 a.m., when they power the bus through a literal village flood. The students, who had untucked their uniforms assuming they'd get a rainy day off, are dragged right through the deluge. But the ultimate punchline of this entire harrowing expedition? It hits at 8:05 a.m. They successfully brave the apocalyptic waters, arrive at the school gates, and realize the school is officially closed because of the flood. You literally can't make this stuff up. Moving right along to section 2, village kids and study hacks. So these students categorically refuse to take studying seriously. Notice how this breakdown highlights their notebook allocation. Instead of buying separate notebooks for separate subjects, they take a single 120-page notebook and ruthlessly divide it into 5 20% sections. They cram all 5 core subjects into one highly condensed volume, writing in microscopic handwriting just so they don't run out of space. It is an incredible display of resourcefulness masking a deep, profound aversion to academic effort. But here is the massive twist. You might think they're cramming 5 subjects into one notebook just to save a little money, right? Not at all. The source reveals that these kids are actually from incredibly wealthy landowning families. They could literally buy the entire school if they wanted to. So why the penny pinching? Because all their vast wealth is locked up in a dramatic, never-ending property dispute. It's like a daytime soap opera playing out in the village. This quote is a translation of the intense courtroom-style arguments between the student's father and uncle. They yell traitor and demand the entire property, while the aunt acts as a makeshift referee, forcing them to apologize after hurling insults. This endless legal battle ensures that, despite having vast land, they are still bringing tea-stained single notebooks to class. All right, on to section 3, classroom romances and seat shuffles. Every single classroom has the bata cot, the absolute chatterboxes whose mouths literally run dry from speaking so much. But their real arena isn't verbal at all, it's digital. The social politics of WhatsApp statuses in this ecosystem are incredibly high stakes. A student will upload a status and meticulously change the privacy settings so that it is visible to exactly one person, usually the girl he's trying to impress. Meanwhile, the boy's friends are running this wild counterintelligence campaign, aggressively warning other boys to keep their eyes down because she's his, which usually just terrifies the poor girl with their over-the-top territorial behavior. And this brilliantly illustrates how teachers attempt to control this rampant socializing and how spectacularly they fail. Fed up with the chatter, the teacher enforces a strict boy-girl seating arrangement for the first period. Look at the left side. You see the result. A hostile standoff. The girls immediately construct defensive barricades out of their school bags, right down the middle of the desk, ensuring absolutely zero accidental contact with the quote-unquote predators sitting next to them. But check out the right side. The second that first period ends, the enforced social engineering completely collapses, and everyone instantly reunites with their original friend groups. To make that transition happen, the students have exactly 30 seconds. That's it. That is the brief, chaotic window between the first teacher leaving and the second teacher entering. In those 30 seconds, the classroom turns into a full-blown stampede. Students frantically sprint across the room with their heavy bags, desperately reclaiming their desired seats. By the time the second teacher walks in, the students are literally panting, completely out of breath from their tactical classroom redeployment. Which brings us to Section 4, the nanny house study illusion. Okay, so when these students go on a 4-day trip to their nanny's house, their grandmother's house, they pull off this move purely for theatrical effect. They borrow a completed notebook from a classmate and pack it in their bag. Now, they have absolutely zero intention of opening it or copying the notes. The sole purpose of bringing this borrowed notebook is the illusion of productivity. It's to establish rola, or dominance, in front of the extended family. They want the relatives to whisper in awe, "Wow, look at him. The world might turn upside down, but this boy never stops studying." Of course, the reality is they don't study a single word, and they inevitably leave the borrowed notebook behind at the grandmother's house, every single time. And actually leaving the grandmother's house? It's a complete emotional saga. A simple exit strategy devolves into a multi-day hostage situation. On day 3, they pack up and sit in the auto rickshaw. Immediately, the grandmother starts crying, so they abort the mission. Day 4 is entirely consumed by the mother consoling the weeping grandmother. It isn't until day 5 that they finally manage to pull away, with the auto rickshaw driver mercilessly mocking them for their inability to just say goodbye and leave. It perfectly captures the inescapable emotional gravity of Indian family dynamics. Finally, Section 5, washroom clubs and happy suspensions. Let's move to and see how this builds into an underground subculture. During class, students get a specific chol, like an uncontrollable itch to leave the room, but they aren't going to the washroom for its intended purpose. No way. There is a massive queue at the sink solely dedicated to a highly synchronized grooming ritual. Step 1, wet the hair. Step 2, extract the classic round plastic pocket comb. Step 3, insert exactly 2 fingers into the back of the comb for maximum grip. Step 4, aggressively spike the hair up into a rigid peak. It's literally an assembly line of teenage vanity happening right next to the urinals. But hair gel isn't the most egregious washroom violation. That would be contraband electronics. Based on our source, if we look at the reasons students smuggle phones into the washroom, a staggering 95% are doing it to blast loud music and throw a makeshift dance party in a huddle. They are literally turning the school bathroom into a daytime nightclub. Naturally, this total lack of subtlety means that when they finally step out, a mob of angry teachers is waiting to ambush them. And when they inevitably get caught red-handed with a smartphone, blaring music, surrounded by their friends, the teenage brain just completely short-circuits. The panic-induced excuse they instinctively throw at the furious teacher is this absolute gem. "Ma'am, it was to study from YouTube." It is a hilariously desperate attempt to weaponize education as an excuse for throwing a rave in the men's room. And obviously, it doesn't work. So what is the ultimate punishment for all this? Suspension. But, and this is wild, in this ecosystem, our source tells us that suspension is entirely redefined. It is not a punishment. It is secretly viewed as a glorious, consequence-free vacation. The parents are called, the phone is handed over, and the kid is sent home. There, they enter this luxurious retirement phase. They don't have to write leave applications. They don't have to answer to teachers. They just sit at home, happily scrolling on their phone, hanging out with the only other retired person in the house, their grandfather. It completely subverts the school's authority. To wrap up this sociological deep dive, we have to look at the creator of our source material, who leaves us with this exact number, 15,000. That is the number of comments they demanded within 1 hour of posting in exchange for personal replies. It's a stark reminder of the economics of animation and digital storytelling. Creating these vivid, hilarious windows into high school life drains the creator's pockets, requiring aggressive audience engagement just to sustain the art. So, as we close this explainer, I'll leave you with a provocative thought. In an era where incredible animated storytelling requires such massive, immediate digital validation to survive, what other brilliant, chaotic ecosystems are we missing out on exploring simply because the algorithm wasn't fed in time? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this dive, and keep your curiosity sharp.